Thank you for tuning in to No Sudden Moves Radio. And remember, stay on the proven path so you don't risk falling behind. Here at Business Legends, we don't overthink it. Look around and see what everyone else is doing. If it's working for them, it will work for you.
Welcome to Wait It Out, where we believe there's no reason to act now. The opportunity will still be there when the timing is better.
The age of disruption isn't coming, it's here. And the boldest move isn't following the crowd, it's following your why. I'm Patrick Ledden, and you're listening to Disruption Lab. Welcome to Disruption Lab, folks. So glad you're joining us today. You know, it's been an interesting week for me. Earlier this week, I went out to Washington, D.C., and I worked with a large government agency. I spoke to hundreds of people about disruption in their world. And as I talked to them, I was like, this is really relevant. I'm seeing it in their eyes. They're telling me afterwards. The things I'm telling them about and sharing with them is really helpful to them in the journeys they're on. And then I kind of like flip a switch and I fly back to Nashville. And the next day I speak to a mastermind group of business owners who are trying to grow and scale their business. And they're getting together to talk about everything from a startup to something very sizable, but how do they scale it and grow it and build it from there? And guess what? The stuff I talked about to them was also very relevant and useful to them, which just reminded me how much disruption we're all dealing with. And when somebody can come along, me in this particular instance, and provide them some thoughts about how they can approach it, what roles they can take on, the strengths that they bring to the table, all of a sudden it makes the government agency in DC and the startup business from somewhere else in the world, gosh, so much more similar, because we're all dealing with disruption and we're all trying to figure this thing called life out. If you join the podcast, you recognize that we talk about your purpose for your team, your organization, yourself. We call it your fire inside. And sometimes we have curveballs in life that get thrown at us, disruptions, if you will. And we think, gosh, this disruption is just blowing everything up. My plan is getting thrown around in bad ways, or maybe even thrown out. And I would say to you, that could be true. But just for a moment, maybe there's a new opportunity that's coming out of this disruption. And perhaps you could be the person who embraces it. Today, I'm joined in the Disruption Lab by somebody whose life is really all about disruption. He is the owner of a company called DonCo, and it's a multi-generational business these days, and it started a couple generations before that. And what they do is they help organizations that are dealing with predominantly industrial byproducts. You know, you produce something, a widget, and as you produce it, there's some scrap along the way. They call people like David and they say, we got a bunch of stuff here piling up, or we're not sure what to do with it. And David and his team take that disruption of that byproduct and turn it into something new. They have a think tank. They have a great team. They're featured in the book Disrupt Everything and Win, as we'll talk about today in chapter 16. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation about how to look at something in a different way, in a disruptive way. So let's join David and myself talking about how to disrupt everything and win. David Mendelson, welcome to Disruption Lab.
Good morning, Patrick. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. I don't think I know anybody who works with disruption as often as you do. You live and work.
It's the pool in which I swim.
It is the pool in which you swim, right? Sometimes we're swimming in it so much we don't even realize it sometimes, probably. But you are all about disruption. You're actually featured in the book that I wrote with James Patterson. You're one of the chapters. I think you said it's 16, right? Chapter 16. About
get a T-shirt made.
Yeah, you need to get a T-shirt made for sure. And it's a chapter that's all about the idea of seeing insights, seeing things that other people don't see, using our brains to be disruptive in so many ways. And that's exactly what you do. And I thought, I could explain what you do to a certain extent. I wrote about what you do, but gosh, what you do is so interesting. I don't think there's anybody who can explain it better than you. So if you don't mind, just talk to the audience a little bit about what is the business you've built?
Oh, beats the hell out of me. So we work at the point of friction where raw material doesn't equal finished goods. We're not manufacturing anything. We are not designing anything. We visit companies from small regional companies to what I call the alphabet soup of international business. at their unique manufacturing processes, there will be steps where a byproduct is thrown off that is very unique to them. We're brought in to solve that material, figure out how to best use it, look at it through a different set of eyeglasses, so to speak, and figure out a better way to handle it than what they're doing presently. Sometimes we walk the plant and say, you guys are doing great. Call us when you have a problem. Sometimes you're doing great, but let's make these process changes inside your plant and gain some tremendous efficiency. And sometimes the material is going right to the landfill, and our think tank of 15 people with a little over 300 person years of experience dealing with byproducts will ideate and create brand new uses for these very unique byproducts.
So
Every day is a new
yeah.
thing.
So I'm making a widget, or I'm producing something. I'm manufacturing
Lots of
something,
widgets.
and along the way of producing this thing, I'm trimming some stuff off. I'm shaping it in this way, and scrap or things are landing on the floor. And
Yep.
and you come along and you sweep that stuff up with us mentally and otherwise, and you say, here's what you can actually do with that thing that you thought you were going to have to pay somebody to haul off.
Correct. And it could be something as simple as, a corrugated box out of a big pick and pack operation. It could be something as sophisticated as the unique byproducts from manufacturing artificial skin for burn victims and everything in between. So we never know what we're going to find when we walk the floor of a plant. We're looking at it very differently than a consultant or a manufacturer. And oftentimes where we start thinking there's going to be something, we end up somewhere entirely different within the plant. So it's really kind of crazy. It's a lot of fun. Every day is different.
I'm just fascinated by it because it literally is. It is. Your phone can ring and like anything can come across your desk or into your ear. I guess when the phone rings. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it does.
Yeah, we made a course with Franklin Covey, as through a partnership, and David and his team are featured in one of the videos to help people think differently, to see what's possible. And I remember in that video they're talking about I believe it was ropes that you're getting right. Yeah, talk about that if you don't mind.
Our fingers are in so many different industries, it's crazy. And my wife always tells me that I've got the best cocktail chatter because the stories get interesting. So if anyone's ever been to a rodeo or works in a ranch, the lasso that you throw around the head of a cow is treated with a certain type of wax. And in the manufacturing process of that lasso, there is scrap wax that gets purged and is contaminated, etc. And that material was going to the landfill. And we were brought in to solve that problem and created a unique use for this very unique contaminated wax. And it was a win for our customer, who now has a better raw material. It was a win for the manufacturer of the wax, and it was a win for who was selling the material to their customer, the lasso manufacturer. And it was a win for the lasso manufacturer, who then had a cleaner operation. So it's always a triple win with us. We're either raising revenue, lowering costs, but creating a market for the byproduct. It's fun.
You ever have people to say, I wish I could make some more of this byproduct?
Actually, what's interesting to me is that doesn't happen so much, but the people who are consuming byproducts often are saying, can you make more for me?
Oh, demand is outstripping supply at that moment.
And talk about disruption in our society. You and I are of a certain age that there have been industries that have been disrupted that changed the scrap world entirely. So when you and I were kids, when these things called computers were first coming out, the way to interact with a computer was with a computer tabulation card. It's like a 4-inch by 8-inch card that you filled in the zeros and ones on the card. There was a whole industry of paper mills built to make that very sophisticated paper, and there's a whole market for that scrap after those cards were used. And that was a grade of scrap traded just like scrap aluminum cans are today. However, with the advent of the floppy disk, you no longer needed the tab cards. So the tab cards started to disappear, but all those companies that were using tab cards as a raw material, which there were thousands of tons a month being generated, they had no raw material, right? Because it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That's happening today with companies that were built to use old newspapers as a raw material. Well, with the advent of these things, the smartphone, the amount of newsprint being printed is a fraction of what it once was. So all these companies are scrambling to come up with alternative fibers that they can use, even though their process was designed to use newspapers. And they ask, can you make me some more old newspapers? No, no, it's going to make you scrap. It is a byproduct. And that's what makes our world so interesting.
So one thing I tend to do a lot with clients in my work is I'll sit down with executive teams and we'll talk about what are the disruptions happening in the world and how are those disruptions shaping the market for you. And it sounds like in your world, you have the clients, your partners out there that you work with that are having these type of conversations and they're seeing new products they're going to develop. And that obviously trickles down to the byproduct they produce or don't produce. And that impacts another group to say, okay, now this is disrupting where we're getting our raw materials from. So I'm just curious, as a person who sits at the intersection of so many of these discussions, you must see some things out there that are kind of disrupting the world where you know it's going to change the supply of certain things. So everywhere I go, they talk about AI. Well, what is AI going to produce or not produce from a scrap perspective that we didn't have before? I would imagine some things would make the processes more efficient, maybe even more effective in manufacturing. It might reduce the amount of scrap. Or byproduct. You tell me.
Yes, we do sit at that intersection, but the key piece to understand what we're doing is no one's manufacturing what we're selling. It is a byproduct.
Right.
And there's no way to predict what the next product is going to be that is going to generate the newest unique byproduct. I do find that, at least in manufacturing, the next great thing is often overblown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what is interesting is our material, what we deal with often is a forward-looking indicator, because if a product is really getting big, the scrap is going to hit us before the product hits the shelf. So it's really interesting to see, oh yeah, we've been dealing with that for 3 years or 4 years, but it's the biggest Christmas toy for 2028 or something like that. Which is kind of interesting.
Man, if it wasn't for NDAs, you could have a great business on eBay.
Yeah. Though it's interesting, I was at a meeting week before last where dealing with the head of technology for a very, very large publicly traded company. And he asked, does anyone hear of AI? Yes, we all heard of AI. He said, that's so passe. We're now dealing with physical AI, which is a whole nother world, which I find fascinating. That's starting to hit our world, our lives as well. But
yeah. Well, how about this though? As you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, okay, so you might maybe something new is coming to market. Some companies creating something new they're really excited about. They're pouring capital into this thing, excited about it. You're seeing byproducts come out of the process earlier on before really the market adopts it. But then market doesn't adopt it. And all of a sudden, all that stuff, there's a lot of it they got to figure out what to do with, because maybe they don't even want to retail it. Maybe they want to do something else with this thing because they don't want their brand associated with that thing anymore. And B, you're going to think through what they can do with this, and then all of a sudden there won't be any more of that.
Well, you're bringing up a good point, but you got to separate it even further.
Okay.
If a product is ramping up, you are ramping up a whole supply chain of raw materials going into that product. So the byproduct from manufacturing super widget, right, is we're brought in to solve that problem. Okay. Now, super widget fails, right? So now they've got the super widgets that they want not to be on the store shelf, as you said, but you also have this entire supply chain that was going into super widget and only super widget. So all the suppliers then have a problem as well. What are they going to do with this stuff that they were making for super widget, and super widget doesn't exist anymore? So we're brought in on all kind of 3 levels of that problem. And it does happen more often than I'm sure anyone wants to have happen.
So it seems to me that when you think about being at the forefront of your work and kind of leaning into your work, there's some value in saying, okay, here's where the world's going to go and here's what people are interested in right now. But the reality is, I would imagine, that a lot of your work starts when the phone rings and somebody calls in and says, I have this thing. And some of those things you might be able to predict they're going to come. Many of them you can't. So it seems like to me, like the strategic work you do and the things you can do to get out in front of it would obviously be relationship building so that these people know to call you, but also internal capacity so that you're able to have your think tank brilliantly come up with ideas.
Interesting. Yeah. Yes. I tell our team the two most important words you ever hear on your customer or supplier's mouth is your first and last name. When they have a problem, we want them to call us because there's going to be problems with supply chains, et cetera. I lost my train of thought. I just lost it.
That's okay. It's a disruption.
It's a disruption, right? It's a total disruption.
Well, I can reset. Here's what I said. I was saying that the ability for you to build relationships in your team, and also the ability for you to build internal capacity.
Yes. Okay. So it's critically important to have customers and suppliers know who we are.
Right.
But from a DonCo perspective, we fight to stay small because as you mentioned, our business is very relationship oriented and it's very granular. And if we look at our business like a giant jigsaw puzzle, each member of our team is bringing new byproducts to the table every day. And if we were only 2 people, we wouldn't have enough pieces on the table to kind of put together, my male to your female, so to speak. If we had 300 people, we'd spend too much time looking at our own stuff and not talking to the suppliers and customers. And those are the people that we have to be engaging with. So we really feel that to stick to our knitting, to be really good at what we do, we have to keep the right size. It's not necessarily a scalable business because things will start falling through the cracks. Let me put it one more in perspective. 7 out of 10 transactions that we do, something goes wrong. It's the nature of what we do. And we have to solve them, and we solve them all the time, but it's part of the process.
Have you had times where you're in the process of fighting to say small? There's got to be times where you've said no to things that you have to. And there's probably some times where you've said no to things that seem like, this is a great thing if we were to do this. But if we do it, XYZ starts to unfold.
Yes. Some of the best deals are the ones you walk away from. And they end up being successful for somebody else. It was just too far outside of the way we do things. And we don't have voicemail. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, people answer our phones because we want to be the first company to be called when there's a problem relating to an issue we can solve. So we've had companies call us wanting us to take over 500 retail locations, and they've got scrap at every location. That's not our cup of tea. We're not going to be dealing with 500 unique locations. The manufacturer of the product going into those locations, those we solve really, really well.
Interesting. As you were saying that, I was thinking about, I've told this to plenty of audiences and teams I work with, and I'll say, you notice we didn't call the book Change Everything. We called it Disrupt Everything. And the idea is that sometimes the most disruptive thing you'll do is change everything. You might choose to embrace some new thing that's going to cause all sorts of changes. There's other times where the most disruptive thing you can do is say no to the change and lean into stability and say, this is not who we are. This is not our purpose. This is not whatever it might be. And once I say it, people are like, okay, I get that. That's not even like a nuance. That's like I think a big thought.
Because you have to be very aggressive to say. Sometimes you have to be very aggressive. That is not helpful to where we are going and what our culture is. And if it's the really shiny golden toy that's sitting there that you think you should take, but in your heart of hearts you realize no, that is not going to be helping us. You got to be aggressively saying no, and we have to do that from time to time.
So you said your culture. I think I found your organization as I studied it and we wrote about it. I find your culture really interesting in your organization. In fact, I don't know if there's a parallel in your mind between the ability to see the value in a byproduct in a manufacturing facility and as some way of seeing the value in people. And I'm not saying that your people are byproducts of anything. I don't mean it that way. They're not waste or scrap. Don't hear me. I'm not saying that. But it's the ability to see like there is value in this byproduct in manufacturing also allows me to see the value that's often overlooked elsewhere. That's a better way to say that. So I just saw that in your culture because you're like, well, this person we hired to do this job, but now they're doing that job. I mean, you've had to learn something that I think people can listen to and say, gosh, David has picked up on something about seeing value in people, whether it's at work or at home or any place else in life.
It's really interesting. It's cliche, but I always tell our team, culture beats strategy every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And as much as I love our family business, I'm more in love with my business family. We've got great people. We've got this thing called the DonCo threshold. When someone has been with the company longer than they were alive before joining the company, we have a celebration and they get a bonus. That happens to us all the time in our small group of 50 people. As you said, we've got people who've joined us with one set of skills and expecting them to do a certain task or certain job, and they have morphed into saying, oh my gosh, I could do that at DonCo. I'm going to go do that, and they just flower, they just grow. So we're very, very fortunate. We have very little turnover, and we've got people who care. The way we're structured, they have to care about each other because it brings value to everybody. It brings value to the company, to our customers, to our suppliers, and to each other. So it's some of the happiest days of the year when we're all together. It's really cool.
That's awesome. One thing we noticed is everybody has these strengths. We call them the disruptive strengths. And you're an example of a couple of disruptive strengths in the book about the ability to think deeply, to gain insights. That's what you do all the time. And the ability to believe better is possible. You do that all the time as well. So you're a great example of both of those in the book. And what we find is as we work with people that read the book, we talk to folks, sometimes we struggle to see the strengths other people bring to the table. And there's lots of different reasons. I'm just so busy as a leader or as a parent in a home. Sometimes I don't always see the strengths in my kids or whatever it might be. So I'm busy. Certainly an excuse I can use. Or people might say, well, I am attracted to people who are like me. So I just assume they've got the strengths I've got because we're together all the time or whatever it might be. What is it about you, David, do you think that allows you to see the strengths in folks like that you see?
Well, I'm a natural introvert. I don't particularly care. I know you.
I just reacted.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? My wife doesn't believe it either. I really don't enjoy being in large groups of people. I enjoy one-on-ones, two-on-twos, three-on-threes. Anything beyond that, I'm really not comfortable. But I find that I enjoy digging into what's going through the other person's mind more than talking about what's going through my mind. And I get lucky in that. I mean, an old friend of mine's father used to say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You keep listening, you do less talking, do more listening. And I think I'm pretty good at that. And I've had the good fortune to be interacting with people who I hear from them could be very, very additive to my life and and our business. So I think that's if it's a strength, I think that's where it comes from, is that I'd rather listen and learn than pontificate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Sometimes people really struggle with it. I know I have at times. It's probably like I'm talking. I'm like, why am I still talking? I already know what I know.
Though what's interesting, and I love this about you, is when you tell a story, you add lots of detail. And in my world, and especially my business world, detail matters. It really matters. So sometimes I feel like I'm talking too much, but in order for someone on my team or my family to understand what I'm doing, they have to hear the entire story. They have to hear all the detail. And so, damn, I got to stop talking and let them talk. But
the detail part is funny because I'll read things that'll say, as a speaker, your story should be less than 2 minutes. I don't have any story that's less than 2 minutes.
Me neither.
But this week I was in D.C. in front of a large government agency, and the next day, which was yesterday, I was back in Nashville speaking in front of a masterminds group for people, entrepreneurs trying to build their businesses. And both of them, I'm able to draw them into the story. So the question becomes, I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to who are you telling the story for? If you're telling the story because you want to come across brilliant or it's something about you, that's problematic. But if you're telling the story because there's something in it that'll be valuable to them, you believe, then they kind of hang with you.
You got to push the story.
So I think it comes down to that. Has there ever been a time, since this is a disruption podcast, has there ever been a time where the phone rang and somebody really disrupted you with what they said on the other end of the line, or anything else in your life where you're like, gosh, that really kind of stopped me, David Mendelson, in my tracks?
Wow, that's an interesting question. No, but I would say that this just happened yesterday. And I don't know if this is apropos to the conversation, but for me, disruption has become death by a million cuts. Prior to COVID, our corporate structure, we had 16 people in our headquarters. And then after COVID, we re-engineered the business and everyone's working from home and they all love it and it's working out great. But there's four of us in our headquarters now in a much smaller space. And I share an office with my father, my 93-year-old father, who is incredibly engaged and absolutely loves what we do and is always wanting to learn. But he sits behind me, literally in the office, and I'm looking this way, and I am thinking, and I'm talking to somebody, whatever, and he's throwing out questions from behind me, and it's like, boom, boom. I can't think, literally. I've gotten to the point where, Dad, we've got to change this. This has got to change. And so yesterday after work, I have the good fortune to have my desk overlooks the city, facing out into a window. I turned it 90 degrees. So now my dad is right here. So if he needs me or has a question, he can wave and he'll catch me on the eye, as opposed to disrupting my thought process every moment of my life. So
when I say a disruption, something that stops you in your tracks, you're like, yeah, I have that about 14 times a phone call.
Exactly right. It's crazy. And
Well, I actually love that example, because sometimes we think, oh, it's got to be this massive thing in life that just like is life altering. And disruption can be that, but oftentimes it's just something small, a conversation, an interaction, something that persists for a while until it finally stops you in your tracks.
And then you got to make a change. And that's what I did yesterday. And I'm not working in the office today, but I've come Monday. It's going to be my first trial with our new setup to see if that disruption has been removed from my life.
Yeah, I can see you're working from your home office today. I think I just saw your father walk by.
Hi, Dad. I love you.
Now, you also have your son working in the business.
Yes, my son just joined us a little over a year ago, which was a fascinating transition from going from a 2-generation, active generation business to 3 generations active in the office, which I thought we planned really well for. And 99%, I'd say we were hitting the cover off the ball. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting to have all 3 generations sitting and having the oldest generation telling the youngest generation interesting stories about things that we just don't do anymore. It's, it's part of the corporate culture, it's history, and there's tidbits to be learned from, but perhaps there's a better way to convey that information than a 30-minute conversation in the middle of the day. So that's what I'm working on. We'll do that. We'll talk about this over dinner.
It's legacy work in some regard.
Exactly.
What is pleasantly surprised you about having 3 generations working together like this?
It is joyous. It is absolutely joyous. Having my son look at my dad as a mentor, look at him as a jokester, give high fives when something happens, and then also deal with the frustration. This is a sales business, and Michael is learning to engage and make sure that the people have his name on their mouths when they have a problem. And he gets frustrated that people don't return the phone calls or something went wrong. And I always explain to him that, it's 8 touches before you get anything done typically. But it is just a joyous experience having 3 generations together.
Yeah, I always find in sales related situations, and having owned my own business for a number of years, and there's always sales work. Everybody's a salesperson, I believe, but there's a lot of sales work you're doing to make sure you get enough, if nothing else, enough income to pay payroll. And going through the process of doing that, you go through the learning that sometimes it's you don't got it till you got it. There's deals will fly away. You also get so much in the grind. Sometimes it's hard to not be cynical. Like, oh, we don't have it. Don't celebrate yet. And you lose the joy of it. For me, it's been a really introspective ride to go, okay, yeah, they're not going to call you back right now. Guess what? You're not the most important person in their world right now. And that's okay.
And that's something that I stress to our entire team and new people who end up joining us is scrap and byproducts is by definition the last thing people want to deal with. It's a pain in the butt. And it's not the exciting stuff that you're doing when you're making the new super widget, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that they don't call you back, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
You just take it personally. But it is a joyous experience. I knock on wood every day that we get to do this together. It's fun.
So as we wrap up our conversation, and I've loved the discussion so far, as we wrap it up, I have a question that I ask every guest. A little bit different than most questions, I think. And it stems from my producer, Jess, for the podcast. She said to me, Patrick, how do you talk about disruption? And then there's a simple thing you do in your life. You never disrupt at all. And I said, what's that? She goes, you buy your same coffee from your same place, no matter where you go. It's always from the same, global coffee company out there that has a place on every corner. She said, can you disrupt that? So I started this process of, I call it pursuit of the perfect vanilla latte. But just when I go places, I try local coffee shops and do that, and take a photo, put it by newsletter, things like that. So my question for you is there a drink, or you could do a food product, but let's start with drink if there's one that comes to mind, that you're like, I'm in the pursuit of the perfect one of this, or I've found it. And if you found it, like this is David's quintessential whatever, what is it?
Wow. You are so timely, my friend. You are so timely. I'm going to say not a drink, because this is my 5th week without coffee. I've given up caffeine, which I think is, go David, I'm doing well there. But wherever I go, and we do business in all 50 states, I try to search out the best barbecue. And I know where I consider the best barbecue that is not made in my kitchen. And wherever I go and try something new, I always send a picture back to the owners of said barbecue and say, guys, this place I'm at right now, they're not competition. Don't worry about them. But my son and I have been toying with the idea. We've got a barbecue sauce that we think was invented by my grandfather and my father that we think is, the best barbecue sauce. We keep talking about maybe we want to produce it. That would be not a disruption. That would be taking a left turn from going scrap business into a consumer product sitting on the shelf. But we think we've got the best.
I was just thinking, I don't know if you necessarily want to call it byproduct barbecue.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, it's kind of like there's some cheese products that are the original recycled food because it's a blend of all the scrap cheeses together. Yeah, no, that's not our barbecue.
That's awesome. Is there, by the way, for those who are listening, tell us a couple barbecue joints out in the world that are good places.
Well, my very favorite, and I'm just going to toot their horn. A lot of people find great barbecue in Texas and in Austin, Texas, and there's several that get a lot of press. But my favorite is Terry Black's Barbecue. Mike and Mark Black are the purveyors and twin brothers, and the food is great. And whenever I get down to Austin, I'm trying to get them to Chicago. They actually, it's kind of funny. When I first got to know them, I told them they needed to have a place in Chicago, and we decided we're going to do a pop-up barbecue in Chicago. I borrowed a friend of mine's Italian restaurant that was only open for dinner. He lent me the restaurant from 11 to 4. They drove up from Austin with a 26-foot smoker. They started smoking at 10 o'clock at night, right here in Lincoln Park in Chicago. We opened up without any advertising at 11, and we were sold out by 2. We had lined up around the street. And since then, we've been looking for the right, perfect spot for their barbecue place in Chicago. Then COVID happened, so we didn't do it. But we're still working on it. So if you ever get to Austin, go down, say hi to Mike and Mark at Terry Black.
David, there's few people in the world, I think, that can convince somebody to do that.
To drive across the country.
Yeah, drive a multi-foot trailer up here with a bunch of stuff. And my friend loaned us his Italian. I mean, just the whole story right there. I'm like, that's David.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I'll show you after we're done. I'll show you a book. It's kind of fun.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, folks. If you already have a copy of Disrupt Everything and Win, check out Chapter 16. Reread it. Remind yourself about this. If you don't have a copy, grab a copy and read it. If you don't have any money to buy a copy, go to the store and stand there and read Chapter 16. So you need to know more about David Mendelson and his team. David, thanks so much, my friend. Good chatting with you today.
Great fun. Thanks, Patrick.
All right, folks, that's all I have for today's episode. Thanks, David Mendelson, my friend, for joining us today to talk about disruption across industries. We all face them, and sometimes we feel like this is just messing things up. But then smart people like David come along and say, you know what? It might be messing stuff up. Maybe you didn't want to have this happen, but there's value in it, and we're going to help you find the right path to make that happen. I really appreciate David sharing those insights today about not only byproducts, but people, and how to see the value in people. And I love the story about working with his father and his son That's a long range of experience coming together to do something really special. As we talk about and disrupt everything and win, and in our research around it, the fourth fundamental fact of life is that our time here is finite. Make it count in ways that matter. And you could hear when David was talking about the joy of working with his dad and his son, he's making it count in ways that matter. That's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go disrupt for good.